There's a relationship hierarchy, and most of us have absorbed this conditioning so early that we never thought to question it. I mean, and it goes like, romance is on top and everything else is beneath that. So, friendships, familial relationships, the people who've known you the longest and sometimes see you most clearly, those people just get what's left over after romance has taken its share. And this relational pecking order is not something that we explicitly talk about, but we live it constantly. Hey, lovers. This is Sex in Real Life. Honest conversations about sex and relationships beyond 40. I'm your host, Stacey Herrera. So, a new romantic prospect comes on the scene, and suddenly all your existing plans with your friends become negotiable. The relationship gets serious, and those friendships and peripheral relationships that have sustained you for years, they just start getting less of you, like less time, less investment, less conversation, conversation that actually matters. You just pair off with this other person and your world contracts around that partnership. And this feels normal because it's normal. It's what everyone does. It's what we've been shown. I mean, I did it too. I did it too. But here's what I've noticed about that contraction. It doesn't just impact the friendships, it also impacts the romantic relationship too. Because when the romance has to carry everything, like it carries this big load, like all your needs and y- the need to conversate and every part of you that every need that you have has to be filled inside of this one container. And then it stops being a relationship. Like now it's just this infrastructure that has to hold all of this weight, which is so unsexy because it's heavy, right? My partner and I are close. I mean, genuinely close. I spend more time with him than I do with most of the other people in my life. I'm his person, and that means a lot. And in a lot of ways, he's my person. But our relationship, I should probably re-say that. I don't mean like as an aside, in a lot of ways, he's my person. He's my person. He's my person. But our relationship is still not the center of our entire universe. And I say that not because there's something missing between us, but because while I share nearly everything with him, I'm still discerning about what I bring, right? Not in a withholding kind of way, but there are conversations that I have with, my sister and my daughters, my close friends that are better held in those containers. It's not that I'm keeping secrets from my partner, but there are some conversations that he's either not really interested in having or if I'm honest, conversations that he wouldn't be able to add much to. And I don't take that personal, and that's not about a flaw in him, but it's really important to manage your own expectations around what people have the capacity for and what they're interested in, because not everything needs to be held in every container. I mean, that sounds like a lot of jargon, but I'm not trying to be jargony. um, I know who my partner is and I know who he isn't. And I love every part of him. And I still know that he doesn't need to be my only person, right? And that distinction took me a while, not in this relationship, but just in living. Like, I also thought that my romantic partner was supposed to be everything. But once I came to the awareness that my person doesn't have to be my only person, that changed everything about how I show up in relationships. This is what I've come to understand. Closeness and hierarchy are different things. You can be really close to somebody. I mean, genuinely, fully, specifically, without placing that relationship above everything else in your life. Without letting every other relationship you have atrophy in service to this one relationship. But we have been taught to treat romantic closeness as the goal. You know, your spouse or your romantic partner is supposed to be your everything. Jerry Maguire, oh, the person that completes you. The one who, if you found them, means that you have reached the promised land. But think about what that is actually asking about somebody. Like, what are you asking them to be? Like, your partner needs to be your best friend, your lover, sometimes your therapist, your adventure buddy, your safe place, your co-pilot for all the hard things that life throw at you. They need to know everything about you. They need to hold every part of you. They need to meet all of your needs as soon as you bring them. That's a lot. That's not a relationship. That's like a full-time job with no off days, right? The person who is tasked with doing that job, even when they love you, even when they're trying their damnedest to be all the things, they get tired. And then the relationship starts to feel like something that just has to be maintained. I do want to honor the fact that not everybody enters a relationship with like a fully formed life before, right? Like sometimes, and let me just explain that. Sometimes you grow up in families where being close is not part of the culture, you know, and it doesn't mean that there's no love, but like closeness is just not part of the family dynamic, and some people enter into long-term relationships feeling profoundly alone because they haven't ever been held in that way. And so if your partner is the first person who ever made you feel really seen or known, then it would be easy to make them your everything. And if that's you, if that's your experience and if your partner is your primary person, I get that. And there's nothing to feel guilty about. But the thing about love, when it's working, it doesn't just give you a person, right? Sometimes it gives you a community. Because if you do come from a family that closeness isn't part of the culture, you might inherit that in a relationship, which is beautiful. I mean, I've seen that happen, where someone, comes into a relationship with thin or wobbly connection and, slowly without anybody like trying to engineer it, their world expands. I have, for some reason, almost every person I've been in a relationship with always ends up with, connections with my family, holidays. And sometimes I have a few former partners that are still in relationship with family members. And I think that's beautiful. But that also means that, the romantic relationship then isn't a destination, it's a door, right? Because I am no longer in a romantic relationship with two people that I was formerly in relationship with, and they still have, connection with my family. And I think that's great. I mean, I'm also still friendly with them. So it's not like, oh, they're around and I'm done with them. It's not that kind of situation. But in this instance, the relationship was a door that expanded, their community. And I think that that is a beautiful thing because one of the most generous things that love can do is not just offer itself, but all the all the other things that comes with it, expanding relationships and communities and stuff like that. I think that's great. But that's the reason that we kind of need to also examine the hierarchy that treats romantic relationships as a prize at the end of, an exhaustive search instead of it being the beginning of something that's larger. What if finding your person is less about arriving somewhere and more about gaining access to a whole new set of possibilities? And that includes, like, being fuller and more connected than you had been before. And communities that practice polyamory and ethical non monogamy have already figured this out. They know, and I say that as somebody that identifies as polyamorous, although I've been in a monogamous season for quite a while. But in those communities, there is a very acute awareness that one person cannot and should not carry the entire emotional weight of your life. So, in the polyamorous, ethical non monogamy communities, these structures are built through that understanding, and there is language for it. And I think that monogamous people live that way too. It's just named differently because romance isn't attached to all of those relationships. But in that way, aren't we all polyamorous? If you've got more than one kid, you're loving more than one person. If you've got multiple friends, again, you're loving more than one person. If you are in a relationship and you have kids and you have friends and family and you've got coworkers, this is literally what it means to be polyamorous. So, if we thought that way in monogamous relationships, that our culture, or, our community is more like petals in a flower that, kind of spiral out instead of it just being a single petal rose, right? Then we can feel held, but that also means that those other relationships get equity. So, if your best friend calls you because something's going on, or your sibling knows you because they knew you before your current relationship, or you've got this colleague or coworker that, understands your work life better than your partner does because they work with you, that's okay. These are like different aspects, different containers for different parts of your lived experience. Your partner doesn't need to know every single thing that your best friend knows about you. And of course, your partner doesn't know what your childhood was like intimately the way your sibling does. And of course, they don't know about your work. And so, those relationships, just because you don't lay in bed with these people, doesn't mean that those relationships shouldn't also have equity in the way that your romantic partner does. So I guess what I'm really describing is relationships should be more like a web instead of a ladder. A ladder has the rungs so you can see the hierarchy. But if it were more like a web, then we're talking about like real intimacy distributed across the people who matter to you. And each relationship would be like holding in a way that it's naturally built to hold, like a spider web. So nothing is straining under the weight because the whole web is designed to carry. And here's where this comes back to sex, because it always comes back to sex. When romantic relationships have to carry everything, then sex also starts to feel like service. You know, sex isn't fragile, but it can be, right? Our sex lives can be really fragile because they can really buckle under the weight of a lot of these other things. But if your relationships are a web, then you don't have to bring to bed all of this other shit, right? Sometimes sometimes it is hard to relax during sex because you're still managing a bunch of other things. If there is a way that your partner needs you to respond to make them feel okay, or, if sex is a way to reassure, the person that they are still worthy, it gets complicated and gets muddied. And it would be great if we could just let desire and needs be two separate things, you know, where then sex can be about pleasure and connection, but it doesn't have to be the place you go to get every single need met, which we don't even always realize that we're burdening sex in that way, but it does happen. But then your friendships and your family relationships and your connections outside of your romantic partnership can be an ecosystem that just supports you. So then again, a web, not a ladder. Where I'm really trying to go with this is I just want you to know that you can be someone's person without being their only person. Basically, that's it. And I'm not like trying to diminish romantic love in any way, but when you are held by more than one person, you get to want your partner. You get to have that be a place where you are held there too, but also where, you know, eroticism gets to be fully present because you've got a whole network, right? So again, you can be someone's person without being their only person. Your partner can be your person without being your only person. If this landed for you even just a little bit, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this episode, I would love it if you shared it, post it, text it, pass it along. And if you haven't already, follow the show so that you get new episodes straight in your inbox or your feed. And if you feel inclined and if it's true for you, feel free to leave a 5-star rating and a short review. That genuinely helps more people find these conversations. Okay, next week we're going to talk about authenticity. Specifically, we are going to talk about how we say we want people to show up and what we're really willing to be with. It's going to be really good, deep, juicy, eye-opening, I hope. I will see you next week. Same channel. Ciao.